Marcus West sat in his corner office on the 30th floor of NextGen Technologies, gazing out at the bustling city of Chicago. The skyline shimmered under the midday sun, a testament to the progress and innovation he had helped foster in the tech industry. As the CEO of one of the largest multinational companies in the world, Marcus felt the weight of responsibility on his shoulders. His company had recently been recognized for its commitment to diversity and inclusion, a point of pride that Marcus championed passionately. Today was an important day. He had a meeting with investors who were eager to discuss the upcoming launch of a groundbreaking new product. The stakes were high, and Marcus knew he needed to make a strong impression. He adjusted his tie and ran a hand over his short, neatly trimmed hair, mentally preparing himself for the discussions ahead. As he left his office and walked through the sleek, modern halls adorned with artwork representing diverse cultures, he felt a rush of optimism. He was determined to create a better future, not just for his company, but for the community at large. His team had worked tirelessly to ensure that their new product would not only be innovative, but also accessible to underserved communities. It was more than just a business initiative. It was a mission close to his heart. The meeting went smoothly. Investors were excited, and their enthusiasm fueled Marcus's passion for the project. He presented his vision for how NextGen would use its platform to address societal issues while driving profits. The investors nodded in agreement, their eyes reflecting the potential they saw in his words. Feeling accomplished, Marcus decided to stop by a nearby cafe for a quick coffee before heading back to the office. As he stepped outside, he noticed the vibrant energy of the city. People hustled by, each with their own story, their own struggles. Marcus felt a deep connection to the community, knowing that his success was intertwined with theirs. As he crossed the street, he noticed a police car idling nearby. He was used to police presence in the city, but today, something felt off. The officers inside seemed to be watching him intently. Shaking off the feeling, he continued toward the cafe, eager to grab his favorite brew. But as he reached the entrance, he heard footsteps behind him. Before he could turn around, a voice boomed. "Hey, stop right there." Marcus spun around to see two officers emerging from the squad car, their expressions serious. "What's going on?" he asked, confusion washing over him. "You fit the description of a suspect in a theft," one officer replied, his tone cold and dismissive. "We need to question you. Are you serious?" Marcus said, incredulous. "I'm just trying to get coffee. I haven't done anything wrong." The officers exchanged glances, their posture tense. "We're not asking. Step over here," the second officer ordered, gesturing for Marcus to move to the side of the cafe. "Look, I'm the CEO of NextGen Technologies," Marcus protested, trying to maintain his composure. "You can verify my identity." The first officer scoffed. "We'll verify it after we've questioned you. Just comply, and it'll be easier for everyone." Feeling a mix of anger and disbelief, Marcus stepped aside. He knew his rights, but the oppressive situation made his heart race. He could feel the eyes of passers-by on him, their curiosity morphing into concern as they witnessed the unfolding scene. "Do you have any identification on you?" the second officer demanded, taking a step closer, invading Marcus's personal space. "Yes, I have my ID in my wallet," Marcus replied, trying to stay calm. He fished out his wallet and handed over his business card, but the officer's eyes narrowed, clearly unimpressed. "This isn't enough," the officer said, reaching for Marcus's arm. "We need to detain you for further questioning." "Detain me? For what?" Marcus exclaimed, his frustration boiling over. "I'm not a criminal. This is ridiculous." Without warning, the first officer grabbed Marcus and shoved him against the wall of the cafe. "You're resisting arrest," he shouted, pulling out handcuffs. "What? No, I'm not resisting," Marcus yelled, panic rising within him. As he struggled to break free, He could feel the pressure of the officer's grip tightening around his wrist. "Help! Someone, please help!" By now, a small crowd had gathered, watching the scene unfold. Marcus's heart raced as he realized how quickly the situation had escalated. He felt a sense of dread wash over him. He was a successful businessman, a leader in the community. Yet here he was, treated like a common criminal. As the officers forced him to the ground, Marcus couldn't help but wonder how things had spiraled so far out of control. The world around Marcus seemed to blur as the officers pushed him to the ground. The hard concrete scraped against his skin, and panic surged through him. He could hear the murmurs of the crowd, their voices a mix of shock and disbelief. "Why are you doing this?" a woman shouted from the back of the crowd. "He hasn't done anything." But the officers were relentless. The weight of one officer's knee pressed down on his back, making it difficult for him to breathe. "Stop resisting," the officer barked as Marcus struggled to comprehend the gravity of the situation. "Please, just let me go," he pleaded, desperation creeping into his voice. But the officers ignored his cries, more focused on their own narrative than the truth. After what felt like an eternity, they finally pulled him up and slapped handcuffs on his wrists. The world around him swam back into focus, and he could see the crowd more clearly now. Faces filled with concern, some with anger, others recording the incident on their phones. "Are you serious?" Marcus yelled, looking directly at the officers. "You're making a mistake. Get in the car," one of the officers ordered, shoving him toward the squad car. As they opened the door, Marcus could feel his heart racing. He was being taken into custody for something he hadn't done. He was terrified, but also furious. How could this happen in a city where he had dedicated so much of his time and resources to uplift the community? Once inside the vehicle, the reality of his situation began to sink in. The officers continued their hostile demeanor, whispering to each other about the high-profile case they were dealing with. It felt surreal. How could they view this as a case of crime when he was a victim? "Can I call my lawyer?" Marcus asked, trying to regain some semblance of control. "Not until we finish questioning you," the officer in the front seat responded dismissively, ignoring the urgency in Marcus's voice. Minutes passed as they drove through the city. Marcus stared out the window, seeing the familiar streets, now marred by a sense of dread. He thought about his family, his wife, and the people at NextGen who depended on him. What would they think? What would this do to his reputation, to the company he had built? Arriving at the precinct, Marcus was escorted inside. The fluorescent lights buzzed above, stark and unforgiving. As they walked through the hallways, he noticed officers laughing and joking around. It felt surreal to be in a place where he was being treated like a criminal, while the officers acted as if this was just another day at the office. They led him into a small interrogation room and closed the door, leaving him alone for a moment. He took a deep breath, trying to calm himself. "I need to call my lawyer," he muttered under his breath. The door swung open, and a stern-looking officer entered, followed by another who carried a notepad. "Let's get started," the first officer said, sitting across from him. "We have a few questions." Marcus tried to maintain his composure. "I want to speak to my lawyer first," he insisted. "Once we go through this, you can make that call," the officer replied, scribbling something on his pad. "Tell me your side of the story. Are you serious?" Marcus snapped, frustration bubbling over. "I'm not here to justify myself. I'm the CEO of NextGen Technologies, and I was just trying to get coffee when I was wrongfully detained." The officer raised an eyebrow but remained unperturbed. "Your name came up in a report. We're just doing our job. Now, what were you doing at the time of the incident?" "Getting coffee," Marcus repeated, feeling like he was talking to a wall. "You can verify my identity with my business card. I have nothing to hide." The officer leaned back in his chair, a smirk on his face. It's interesting how you think your title can protect you, but we're all equal under the law, and your status won't get you out of this. Marcus felt a wave of anger wash over him. This isn't about status. This is about right and wrong. I'm not a criminal. As the interrogation dragged on, Marcus could feel the frustration building within him. Every question was laced with disbelief and condescension. The officer's intentions were clear. They were trying to paint him as the aggressor, the troublemaker. Finally, after what felt like hours, Marcus was allowed to make his phone call. He quickly dialed David, his attorney, who answered with urgency. "Marcus, what's going on?" "I heard about the incident," David said, his voice filled with concern. "I need you here. I'm at the precinct, and they're trying to pin something on me," Marcus replied, his voice shaky. "Stay calm. I'm on my way," David assured him. Hanging up, Marcus leaned back in his chair, feeling the weight of the world pressing down on him. He was a businessman, a leader in the tech industry, and now he found himself in a situation that felt like a nightmare. As he waited for David, the reality of racial profiling and systemic injustice hit him hard. He was no stranger to the conversations surrounding these issues, but experiencing it firsthand was a different story altogether. "Why is this happening?" he thought to himself, determination growing within him. He knew he had to fight back, not just for himself, but for everyone who had faced similar injustices. David arrived at the precinct in record time, his presence instantly calming Marcus. He rushed into the interrogation room, exuding authority and confidence. "Let's get you out of here," he said, eyeing the officers with a steely gaze. "David, they're trying to frame me for something I didn't do," Marcus exclaimed, his voice a mixture of frustration and fear. David nodded, turning to the officers. "I'd like to speak with my client alone, please." His tone brooked no argument. The officers exchanged glances, but eventually relented, stepping out of the room and closing the door behind them. "Marcus, tell me everything," David said, leaning forward. Marcus recounted the events leading up to his arrest, his voice trembling with anger and disbelief. "I was just getting coffee. I built my entire career on integrity and hard work, and now this." David listened intently, jotting down notes. "We're going to fight this. I'll reach out to the mayor's office and leverage your connections. This is unacceptable, and we need to make sure it's handled properly." As David formulated a plan, Marcus's mind raced. He thought about the community NextGen served and the responsibilities he had to them. "This isn't just about me," he said, determination seeping into his words. "This is about the systemic racism that continues to plague our society." David looked up, his expression serious. "You're right, but we need to focus on getting you released first. The last thing we want is for this to escalate further." Marcus nodded, taking a deep breath. He knew David was right, but he also felt an overwhelming need to address the larger issue. When the officers returned, David wasted no time. "We'd like to see any evidence you have against my client," he demanded, his voice firm. The lead officer crossed his arms, a skeptical expression on his face. "We're still gathering information. The situation is complex." "Complex?" David echoed, incredulous. "You detain a man without cause, and you call that complex? Let's not forget that you're the ones who escalated this." The officer shifted uncomfortably, clearly not used to being challenged. "We have our procedures," he replied defensively. "Your procedures are what got us here in the first place," Marcus interjected, his voice steady. "This needs to change." The officer opened his mouth to respond, but David cut him off. "This is not a discussion. Either show us what you have or release my client immediately." After a tense moment, the officer finally relented. "Fine, we'll release him, but we expect you to cooperate with our investigation." Marcus felt a wave of relief wash over him. "Thank you," he said, glancing at David who nodded, satisfied. Once outside, Marcus took a deep breath, the fresh air feeling like a liberating force. He couldn't shake the anger and humiliation from the experience, but he was grateful to have David by his side. "Let's get to work," David said as they headed toward Marcus's car. "We need to put out a statement to the press and get ahead of this." "Agreed," Marcus replied, feeling the weight of the situation beginning to shift. "I want to ensure that my story is told accurately. This can't happen to anyone else." As they drove back to the office, Marcus's thoughts swirled. He knew the public would want answers, and he had a platform to deliver them. The more he thought about it, the more determined he became to turn this injustice into an opportunity for change. When they arrived at NextGen, Marcus gathered his executive team for an emergency meeting. He could see the concern etched on their faces as they entered the conference room. "Thank you all for coming on such short notice," Marcus began, standing at the head of the table. "As you may have heard, I was wrongfully detained today by the police. I want to be clear, this is not just about me. This is a larger issue that affects our entire community." Murmurs of disbelief rippled through the room. "How could this happen?" one executive asked, shaking his head. "It happens every day to countless people," Marcus replied, his voice firm. "As a company that values diversity and inclusion, we cannot stay silent. We need to take a stand." Another executive, a woman named Tanya, spoke up. "What can we do? We have a platform and resources that can make a difference. We need to release a public statement and advocate for change," Marcus replied, his passion evident. "I want NextGen to lead the charge against systemic racism, not just within our company, but in our communities as well." The room buzzed with energy as ideas flowed. They discussed creating initiatives to support minority-owned businesses, establishing scholarships for underprivileged youth, and working with local organizations to promote social justice. "I'll reach out to our marketing team to start drafting a statement," Tanya said, her eyes bright with determination. "We can't just address this. We need to actively fight against it." Marcus nodded, feeling a sense of unity among his team. "Let's make this our mission. We can't change the past, but we can shape the future." As the meeting concluded, Marcus felt invigorated. He knew the road ahead would be challenging, but he was ready to face it head-on. With the support of his team and the community behind him, he believed they could make a real difference. The following days were a whirlwind of activity. Marcus and his team worked tirelessly to craft a public statement addressing the incident, emphasizing their commitment to social justice and community engagement. As the statement circulated, it caught the attention of local and national media outlets. Suddenly, Marcus found himself at the center of a media storm. Interviews began pouring in, with journalists eager to hear his story. Marcus prepared himself to be the voice for not just his experience, but for countless others who had faced similar injustices. His first interview was with a prominent news anchor, who greeted him with a concerned smile. "Thank you for joining us today, Mr. West," the anchor began. "We've seen the disturbing footage of your arrest. Can you tell us about that day?" Marcus took a deep breath, his resolve solidifying. "Thank you for having me. What happened to me is not an isolated incident. It's a reflection of systemic racism that many individuals face daily. I was simply trying to go about my day, and suddenly, I found myself in a situation where my dignity was stripped away." The anchor nodded, clearly moved. "How do you think this can change? What steps should be taken?" "Change starts with awareness," Marcus replied passionately. "We need to hold law enforcement accountable and ensure that policies are in place to prevent racial profiling. It's also crucial that corporations like mine take a stand and support initiatives that promote equality and justice." The interview concluded with a message of hope and unity. As the segment aired, Marcus felt a mixture of pride and vulnerability. His story was resonating with people, and he was determined to use his platform to effect real change. However, not everyone was supportive. Social media exploded with reactions, both positive and negative. While many applauded Marcus for speaking out, others criticized him, calling him an angry black man and questioning the validity of his claims. The vitriol was disheartening, but Marcus was resolute. He understood that pushing against the status quo would ruffle feathers. In the midst of the media frenzy, NextGen's leadership team continued to brainstorm initiatives. They decided to host a town hall meeting in Chicago, inviting community members to share their experiences with law enforcement and discuss solutions together. On the day of the town hall, the atmosphere was electric. Marcus stood at the front of the packed auditorium, flanked by his team. The diverse crowd buzzed with anticipation, each person eager to share their stories and contribute to the conversation. "Thank you all for being here today," Marcus began, his voice steady but filled with emotion. "This is about more than just my experience. It's about all of us coming together to advocate for change. We must address the systemic issues that lead to racial profiling and injustice in our communities." As the meeting progressed, individuals shared harrowing accounts of their own encounters with law enforcement. Marcus listened intently, his heart heavy with empathy. Each story reinforced his commitment to fighting for change. One woman stood up, her voice shaking with anger. "I was stopped for driving a nice car. They assumed I had stolen it just because of my skin color. This is my life. It shouldn't be like this." Marcus nodded, feeling the weight of her words. "You're not alone in this. Together, we can push for policies that hold officers accountable for their actions." The meeting continued, a powerful exchange of ideas and emotions. By the end, Marcus felt a renewed sense of purpose. The community was rallying behind him, and he was no longer just fighting for himself. He was fighting for everyone who had faced similar injustices. After the town hall, Marcus and his team met to discuss next steps. "We need to make sure this momentum doesn't fade," Tanya suggested. "Let's establish a foundation that supports victims of racial profiling and advocates for policy changes." "I agree," Marcus replied. "We can create a platform where voices can be heard, and we can work with local leaders to bring about meaningful change." As they formulated their plans, Marcus felt a sense of hope beginning to blossom. He realized that while the road ahead would be challenging, he was not alone. With the community behind him and the support of his team, he was ready to face whatever came next. But amidst the optimism, Marcus was also acutely aware of the challenges he would face in the police department and those who resisted change. As the media continued to cover his story, he braced himself for a potential backlash, knowing that change often comes with resistance. As the weeks progressed, the momentum behind Marcus's advocacy began to grow. The town hall meeting had been a turning point, igniting a wave of support from the community and even gaining traction in national discussions about policing and racial justice. However, with this newfound attention came an unexpected challenge from a familiar foe, the police department. During a press conference, the police chief publicly criticized Marcus's statements and the initiatives his company was undertaking. "Mr. West is misrepresenting the facts," the chief said, flanked by other officials. "We uphold the law impartially. The suggestion that our officers engage in racial profiling is baseless and harmful to our community." Marcus watched the live broadcast from his office, feeling a surge of anger. How could they deny the reality of racial profiling, especially after what had happened to him? It was as if they were trying to silence him and others who had shared their stories. "Can you believe this?" Tanya exclaimed, pacing the room. "They're attempting to undermine everything we're trying to achieve." "Not just that," Marcus replied, his voice steady despite his frustration. "They want to intimidate us. We can't let them." He felt a sense of urgency to respond, to push back against the narrative being spun by the police department. With his team gathered around, he decided it was time to go public with a counterstatement. "We need to reinforce our commitment to this cause and stand up for the community," he said. Tanya and the rest of the team nodded in agreement, their expression serious. They immediately began drafting a response that highlighted the importance of accountability and community engagement. Let's emphasize that we're not just criticizing, we're proposing solutions, Marcus added. We need to invite the police to the table instead of pushing them away. Later that afternoon, they released a statement detailing their intentions to work collaboratively with law enforcement to address community concerns. We believe in the importance of dialogue and constructive partnerships, the statement read. It is imperative that we confront systemic issues with honesty and transparency, ensuring that every voice in our community is heard and valued. As the news circulated, the backlash from the police department intensified. The chief responded with a statement claiming that Marcus was trying to deflect attention from his own unlawful conduct. The officers involved in Marcus's detainment released their own narrative, painting him as an aggressive and uncooperative suspect. Feeling the pressure mount, Marcus prepared for a press conference of his own. He wanted to directly address the accusations and reaffirm his commitment to the community. Standing in front of the cameras, he felt the weight of responsibility on his shoulders. "Thank you for being here today," Marcus began, his voice strong. "I stand before you not just as a CEO, but as a member of this community. The events of the past few weeks have illuminated a critical issue that demands our attention. What happened to me is not an isolated incident. It is a part of a larger pattern of systemic injustice." The crowd murmured, and Marcus could see reporters eagerly scribbling notes. He continued, "We must hold our law enforcement accountable, but we must also seek solutions that unite rather than divide. My goal has never been to vilify the police. Instead, I want to collaborate with them to build a safer, more equitable community for all." The response from the audience was mixed. Some applauded, while others remained skeptical. Nevertheless, Marcus felt empowered by his words, knowing he had spoken the truth. After the press conference, Marcus returned to his office, where Tanya and the team awaited him. "That was powerful," Tanya said, her eyes shining with admiration. "You really addressed the issues head-on." "Thank you," Marcus replied, feeling a sense of camaraderie with his team. "But we need to prepare for the fallout. They won't take this lying down." Sure enough, the police chief doubled down, releasing a statement accusing Marcus of exploiting his position for personal gain. "Mr. West is using his platform to promote a false narrative that undermines the hard work of our officers," the statement claimed. Frustrated, Marcus knew they needed to pivot their strategy. "We have to bring in community leaders to speak out as well," he suggested during a strategy meeting. "We need their voices to amplify our message." The team immediately got to work, reaching out to influential figures in the community, including activists, educators, and local business owners. They organized a panel discussion to address the issue of policing in their city, inviting the police chief to participate. When the date of the event arrived, the atmosphere was electric. The auditorium was filled with community members eager to engage in an honest dialogue. As Marcus stood at the front, he felt the weight of the moment. "Tonight is about understanding," he said, looking at the crowd. "We are here to share our experiences, to listen, and to learn. Change cannot happen in a vacuum. It requires collaboration and empathy from all sides." As the panel discussion unfolded, voices from all walks of life chimed in. Some shared their stories of discrimination and fear, while others spoke about the challenges faced by police officers in their line of work. The tension in the room was palpable, but there was also a sense of hope. When the police chief finally spoke, he seemed taken aback by the emotional weight of the evening. "I recognize that there are concerns within the community," he said, his tone more conciliatory. "We need to do better, and I'm willing to work with all of you to make that happen." Marcus felt a glimmer of hope. Maybe this could lead to real change. The panel discussion marked a significant turning point for Marcus, and the community response was overwhelmingly positive. News outlets hailed the event as a groundbreaking moment in the ongoing dialogue between law enforcement and the community. Suddenly, people were starting to believe that change was possible. In the following days, Marcus and his team capitalized on the momentum. They launched a social media campaign encouraging community members to share their experiences with policing using the hashtag Our Voices Matter. Stories poured in, painting a vivid picture of the pervasive issues many faced. One night, as Marcus scrolled through the posts, he noticed a message that caught his eye. It was from a young woman named Sarah, who described a harrowing encounter with police while she was walking home from a night class. The way she wrote about her fear and isolation struck a chord with him. He immediately reached out to her, inviting her to meet and share her story in person. When they met at a local coffee shop, Sarah was nervous but eager to speak. "I've never really shared my experience publicly," she admitted, her voice shaking slightly. "But I think it's important." Marcus nodded, encouraging her to continue. "Your voice matters, Sarah. It's people like you who can help drive change. What happened to you shouldn't be ignored." As they talked, Marcus could see the passion in her eyes. She recounted the fear she felt when approached by officers late at night, the way they treated her as if she were a criminal simply for being in the wrong place at the wrong time. Her story mirrored countless others, highlighting the need for systemic change. "I want to help," Sarah said, her determination growing. "I want to be part of this movement." "Then let's make that happen," Marcus replied, inspired by her bravery. He invited her to join NextGen's initiative, and she accepted, eager to lend her voice to the cause. With Sarah on board, they organized a series of community workshops where individuals could share their experiences and discuss solutions. The workshops became a safe space for healing and dialogue, bringing together diverse voices from across the community. As the workshops gained traction, Marcus realized that they needed to elevate their efforts even further. He approached Tanya and the team with an idea. "What if we create a scholarship program for students pursuing careers in law enforcement?" he suggested. "We can partner with local colleges to support candidates who are committed to community-oriented policing." Tanya's eyes lit up. "That's brilliant. It would not only empower students, but also help change the narrative around policing." After gathering their thoughts, the team set to work on establishing the scholarship program. They reached out to local universities, drafting proposals and seeking partnerships. Marcus knew that the future of policing needed individuals who understood the importance of community engagement and equity. Meanwhile, the police chief began to see the positive effects of their collaborative efforts. He reached out to Marcus, expressing his desire to work together on the scholarship program. "We need to change the way we recruit and train officers," he admitted. "Your input is invaluable." As the two met to discuss the logistics, Marcus felt a sense of cautious optimism. "This is a step in the right direction," he said, keenly aware of the challenges ahead. "But we need to ensure that we're holding the department accountable for its actions." "I agree," the chief replied. "We're working on developing more comprehensive training programs to address implicit bias and community relations. I want to make sure our officers are equipped to serve the community effectively." As the partnership blossomed, the scholarship program gained attention, with local businesses offering support and donations. Marcus felt a wave of pride wash over him, knowing that they were creating something meaningful that could transform lives. One evening, as he prepared for another workshop, Marcus reflected on the journey that had brought him here. He thought about the initial confrontation with the police, the anger, and the humiliation he had felt. Now, he was not just advocating for change for himself, but was championing a movement that sought to uplift and empower others. The night of the workshop arrived, and the room buzzed with energy. Individuals of all ages gathered to share their stories and ideas. Sarah spoke passionately about her experience, inspiring others to open up as well. As Marcus listened, he felt a deep sense of connection with everyone in the room. The pain and struggles they shared were a testament to the resilience of the community. Together, they were becoming a powerful force for change. After the workshop, a young man approached Marcus. "Thank you for giving us a voice," he said, gratitude shining in his eyes. "It's so important for us to come together like this." Marcus smiled, feeling a renewed sense of purpose. "It's just the beginning. Together, we can create the change we need." The panel discussion marked a significant turning point for Marcus, and the community response was overwhelmingly positive. News outlets hailed the event as a groundbreaking moment in the ongoing dialogue between law enforcement and the community. Suddenly, people were starting to believe that change was possible. In the following days, Marcus and his team capitalized on the momentum. They launched a social media campaign encouraging community members to share their experiences with policing using the hashtag #OurVoicesMatter. Stories poured in, painting a vivid picture of the pervasive issues many faced. One night, as Marcus scrolled through the posts, he noticed a message that caught his eye. It was from a young woman named Sarah, who described a harrowing encounter with police while she was walking home from a night class. The way she wrote about her fear and isolation struck a chord with him. He immediately reached out to her, inviting her to meet and share her story in person. When they met at a local coffee shop, Sarah was nervous but eager to speak. "I've never really shared my experience publicly," she admitted, her voice shaking slightly. "But I think it's important." Marcus nodded, encouraging her to continue. "Your voice matters, Sarah. It's people like you who can help drive change. What happened to you shouldn't be ignored." As they talked, Marcus could see the passion in her eyes. She recounted the fear she felt when approached by officers late at night, the way they treated her as if she were a criminal simply for being in the wrong place at the wrong time. Her story mirrored countless others, highlighting the need for systemic change. "I want to help," Sarah said, her determination growing. "I want to be part of this movement." "Then let's make that happen," Marcus replied, inspired by her bravery. He invited her to join NextGen's initiative, and she accepted, eager to lend her voice to the cause. With Sarah on board, they organized a series of community workshops where individuals could share their experiences and discuss solutions. The workshops became a safe space for healing and dialogue, bringing together diverse voices from across the community. As the workshops gained traction, Marcus realized that they needed to elevate their efforts even further. He approached Tanya and the team with an idea. "What if we create a scholarship program for students pursuing careers in law enforcement?" he suggested. "We can partner with local colleges to support candidates who are committed to community-oriented policing." Tanya's eyes lit up. "That's brilliant. It would not only empower students, but also help change the narrative around policing." After gathering their thoughts, the team set to work on establishing the scholarship program. They reached out to local universities, drafting proposals and seeking partnerships. Marcus knew that the future of policing needed individuals who understood the importance of community engagement and equity. Meanwhile, the police chief began to see the positive effects of their collaborative efforts. He reached out to Marcus, expressing his desire to work together on the scholarship program. "We need to change the way we recruit and train officers," he admitted. "Your input is invaluable." As the two met to discuss the logistics, Marcus felt a sense of cautious optimism. "This is a step in the right direction," he said, keenly aware of the challenges ahead. "But we need to ensure that we're holding the department accountable for its actions." "I agree," the chief replied. "We're working on developing more comprehensive training programs to address implicit bias and community relations. I want to make sure our officers are equipped to serve the community effectively." As the partnership blossomed, the scholarship program gained attention, with local businesses offering support and donations. Marcus felt a wave of pride wash over him, knowing that they were creating something meaningful that could transform lives. One evening, as he prepared for another workshop, Marcus reflected on the journey that had brought him here. He thought about the initial confrontation with the police, the anger and the humiliation he had felt. Now, he was not just advocating for change for himself, but was championing a movement that sought to uplift and empower others. The night of the workshop arrived and the room buzzed with energy. Individuals of all ages gathered to share their stories and ideas. Sarah spoke passionately about her experience, inspiring others to open up as well. As Marcus listened, he felt a deep sense of connection with everyone in the room. The pain and struggles they shared were a testament to the resilience of the community. Together, they were becoming a powerful force for change. After the workshop, a young man approached Marcus. "Thank you for giving us a voice," he said, gratitude shining in his eyes. "It's so important for us to come together like this." Marcus smiled, feeling a renewed sense of purpose. It's just the beginning. Together, we can create the change we need. The night after the unsettling encounter with the police, Marcus couldn't sleep. He lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying the incident over and over in his mind. It wasn't just about the confrontation. It was a stark reminder of the systemic issues that plague society. But he also knew that they were making progress, even if it didn't always feel that way. The next day, he met with Tanya and the team to discuss their strategy moving forward. "We need to focus on the positive changes happening," Marcus said, his resolve strengthening. "The community is rallying behind us, and we have to keep that momentum going." Tanya nodded, her expression serious. "But we also need to address the resistance head-on. We can't ignore the threats coming from within the police department." "I agree," Marcus replied. "We should invite more police officers to our workshops. It's important that they see the faces behind the stories, that they hear the pain and the struggles firsthand." With a plan in place, they set to work organizing a special workshop dedicated to community police relations. They reached out to officers willing to engage in open discussions and share their perspectives. As the date approached, anticipation filled the air. The workshop was designed to be a safe space for dialogue, allowing community members to voice their concerns while also giving officers a chance to explain the challenges they faced in their roles. On the day of the workshop, the room was packed. Community members filled the seats, their expressions a mix of hope and apprehension. Marcus took the stage, feeling the weight of the moment. "Welcome, everyone," he began. "Today, we're here to bridge the gap between our community and the police department. It's vital that we come together to understand each other's perspectives. Change requires dialogue, and I believe we can find common ground." As the discussions unfolded, stories were shared, emotions ran high, and the atmosphere shifted from tension to understanding. Officers spoke candidly about their experiences, the pressures they faced on the job, and their desire to serve the community. In turn, community members shared their stories of fear and mistrust, recounting encounters that had left lasting scars. "Every officer here chose this profession because we want to make a difference," one officer stated, his voice steady. "But we need your help to understand how we can do that effectively." The room erupted in applause, a shared acknowledgement of the struggles on both sides. As the workshop continued, Marcus felt a sense of hope blossom. This was the kind of dialogue that could lead to meaningful change. After the event, a police officer approached Marcus. "Thank you for hosting this," he said, sincerity in his eyes. "I think we're starting to see how we can work together. It's refreshing to hear the community's voice." Marcus smiled, feeling a warmth spread through him. "We need to continue these conversations. It's a journey, not a destination." Over the next few weeks, the momentum continued to build. The scholarship program launched successfully, with several local students receiving funding for their studies in criminal justice. Community members rallied to support one another, sharing their stories on social media and creating a network of support. Then, one sunny afternoon, Marcus received a call from a prominent news network. They wanted to feature him, in a segment highlighting his efforts in community advocacy and police reform. He agreed, eager to amplify their message. When the day of the interview arrived, Marcus stood in front of the camera, ready to share his journey. "Change is not easy, but it is necessary," he stated, his voice steady. "Our community deserves better, and we are committed to holding ourselves and our institutions accountable. We will not stop fighting for justice." The segment aired, reaching audiences far beyond his local community. It sparked discussions on social media, gaining traction across the nation. Marcus's story resonated with many who had experienced similar struggles, igniting a wave of advocacy and support for police reform. As the momentum grew, Marcus received an unexpected message from the police chief. "I want to thank you for your commitment to this cause," he wrote. "It's challenging, but I believe we can make a difference together." Marcus felt a sense of pride swell within him. This was more than just a personal journey. It was a collective effort to redefine the relationship between law enforcement and the community. Months passed, and the changes began to take root. The community saw a reduction in tensions, and the police department embraced a new model of community-oriented policing. The workshops became a regular event, fostering understanding and collaboration. One evening, as Marcus sat on his porch reflecting on the journey, he felt a profound sense of gratitude. "We did this together," he whispered to himself, knowing that the fight for justice was far from over, but also recognizing the strides they had made. The sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple, symbolizing a new dawn. Marcus knew that the path ahead would be filled with challenges, but with the community united behind him, he felt ready to face whatever lay ahead.